So what are we? Well, we're an online software aiming to modernize the way you deliver your technical communications. So instruction manuals, procedural guides, service and maintenance manuals, things like that, which are all traditionally 2D and generally paper-based. With Cadasio, you can instead create 3D, fully interactive versions. We do support all the main CAD systems, but due to the nature of Onshape also being modern and online and forward-thinking, we have a tighter integration with them, and we tend to focus a bit more on it. So why are we doing this? Well, you must have all bought something, and the instructions provided are of really poor quality. It's very difficult to comprehend, and that ultimately reflects badly on the product and the company itself. And when you look at the current procedures used to create these manuals, I'm always a bit shocked at how laborious it actually is. So it may sound familiar to you guys to be using screenshots. Perhaps you're redrawing things manually, using photos, renders, or creating videos. Well, all these methods have downsides, such as the time and cost to create them, and the further cost associated with rework when a product design changes. And then after all that, you ultimately still end up making a flat 2D experience that will no doubt lead to a lot of printing, which is something that more and more companies are wanting to avoid in an effort to become more sustainable. Now, of course, Cadasio can create 2D images. So if you're just after some great 2D images to throw into a Word document, we've got you covered. But since the world's in 3D, a lot of people actually struggle to understand and visualize in 2D. Moreover, you've already invested the time to create the 3D models in Onshape. So it makes perfect sense to repurpose them and present them in a way that not only helps you, but helps your end user. And actually, we're finding that more and more customers themselves are expecting something more than just a piece of paper in the box when they get it. So what I'm going to do is dive straight in and actually show you using Cadasio. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do, just to make you aware, if you do want to have a play with Cadasio, is head to our website, cadasio.com. From here, you can create a free account. It takes about a minute to do, and then you're good to go. When you're then in Onshape, you'll want to get our Onshape app. Now, if you've never used apps in Onshape before, that's absolutely fantastic. In the bottom left-hand corner, when you've got a project open in Onshape, you'll see a little plus, and it's Insert New Element. If I click on there, I can go to Applications and go to App Store. Now you'll probably see that we're on the main landing page, as you can see here. If you can't find us, we're actually under Design and Documentation as well. And if you click on our app, you'll be able to subscribe to us. So it's as simple as that. And then back in Onshape, you click the Insert New Element again, Applications, and you'll then have Cadasio available to you. And once you load this up, you'll be given an additional tab within your Onshape environment. Now I've got mine preloaded and I've got an assembly open, so if I just click on my Cadasio tab, you should see it here. Now one thing I'm going to point out right from the start to you is that you can use Cadasio within Onshape, which is absolutely great. So if you're the person responsible for designing the product and producing the documentation, then you never need to leave Onshape. All the functionalities in here to build up your steps and create your project. But if you perhaps have a separate marketing department or a technical author, then as an Onshape user, you may just want to create the projects for them. So when you actually start the app up in Onshape, this is the view you'll get, and you'll notice that from here I can open a project, which I had done before. I can update projects, which I'll run through shortly, and I can create new projects. Okay, now when you create a new project, you select your Onshape element, you give it a name, and you push it up. Now, so what's really nice is if you as the Onshape user, you're more concerned about actually using Onshape and creating the product, the CAD product, then you can create the Cadasio project and just leave the technical author on their own computer to use Cadasio. So you can see here I've got the same project open in another window, and I could just go off. What's really great then, the Onshape user can get back to using Onshape and doing what they do best. So I'm going to work with this real simple assembly. It's just a really basic gearbox. And the first thing to point out, I'm in what's called the designer of Cadasio here. So this is when you first open up a project. And we've tried to make this as simple and easy to use as possible, a nice and clean interface. And we'd expect the majority of people to get up and running in really a matter of minutes. Now, the whole concept of Cadasio is based around properties and steps. And what you see on screen at the moment, we refer to as our scene. So everything in our scene has got properties, and that could be an object's color, its render style, its position, perhaps its visibility. And we can control those properties using the property bar, which is found at the bottom of the screen down here. Okay. Now, if I use my mouse, I can left click and select an object, and you'll actually notice that the property bar changes, and that's because it's context sensitive. So when I have an object selected, the property bar will show me the properties for that particular object. So I've got a CAD object selected here. I could change its color, its opacity, its render style, and so on. If I click into open space, or if I press my escape key, that clears my selection, and I'm now looking at the properties of my scene. So the scene itself, I could change its background color, or perhaps in this case, maybe I'm going to change the render style of our overall render style. Rather than have it matte, let's make it glossy. So the really important area, as I say, is the property bar down at the bottom. As I mentioned before, to select an object, you can left click it and it'll get selected. But it's worth knowing that on the right hand side of the screen, we have some tools within what we call the selector. So the tab that you see on the right hand side of your screen, if I click on that, you'll see it slides out. And what we've tried to do is make it so that the interface stays clean. So if I click elsewhere, it'll slide back in, providing us with as much real estate on our screen as possible. If I actually want to keep this tab open, I can click on it and I can pin it open like so. And this selector is really useful. Not only do we have our CAD hierarchy, our CAD tree straight from Onshape, this allows us to select stuff as well. So I can pick things graphically, or I can pick things from the tree. We also have a load of tools in here to help us with our selection and help us with our visibility. So things like show all, hide all, select instances, select siblings, and so on. So for example, I might select this bolt. And from the selector, I want to select all instances that are visible of that bolt. So I'm going to click select instances. And that'll select them all like so. Now, what I want to achieve with this is I want to show that these bolts are going to be going into the holes that they sit in. So to do that, I'm going to move them out, but I want to also display some explode lines indicating where they actually sit in the full assembly. So with the items selected, I can start to add additional items to our scene from an area we call the toolbox. And that's found on the left-hand side. So on the left-hand side, you see a little toolbox, and this behaves the same as the selector. If I click on it, it'll slide open. The toolbox has additional items such as texts, balloons, images, arrows, and kind of markup that we can add to our scene. In our case, I'm going to add a 3D line. So I've gone to my toolbox. I could choose 3D line like so. Now I could go off and draw a 3D line just in space and click where I want it to be. But with my bolts pre-selected, a real nice feature is I can just auto place them by clicking the text in the message down here and just say OK. Now you won't have noticed any difference here because it's drawn the lines exactly where the bolts are at the moment. But I can start to manipulate these bolts and move them, and the explode lines will automatically appear. Now to move things in Cadasio, we use the triad. And the triad appears whenever I've got a 3D object selected. And you should see it in the center of the screen, is this thing here. If I hover over and left click and drag one of the singular arrows, that allows me to move along a single axis. If I drag along a plane, that allows me to move along 2 axes. And if I drag the center diamond, it allows me to free drag. So in this case, with the bolts, I'm just going to drag it along a single axis like so. I can see that the explode lines that I added from the toolbox are automatically drawn, and it gives us quite a nice view like this. Now, I've made some changes to the properties in this step. I've changed the render style. I've moved the bolts, so they've changed, their position properties changed, and I've added some lines. Now these lines, just to point out, are like other objects. I can choose them and I can change the color. Again, with the bolts, I can start to mess around with them, but I've made several changes here, and I want to capture these changes as a step. So to do that, I go up to the top of the screen and you'll see I've got create step. So if I click on here, this allows us to create a brand new step, and it'll remember any property changes that I've just done. Within this create step interface, I can set different animation styles, which I'll get to in a bit. I can change the step behavior, I can set the step name and put a description. I'm quite happy for this demonstration just to call it step 2. So I'm going to click create. So I've now got 2 steps. I've got my initial starting step and this one with the bolts out. A real quick way to transition between steps is to use the keyboard shortcuts of page up and page down. So if I go to page down, you'll see that I've gone back a step. So now my initial start step, and you'll see that the render style changed and the bolts moved back to where they were. If I go page up, hopefully this is coming across okay on the webinar, you should see it animates nicely, the bolts move out and the lines get drawn. So straight away, I've got a nice animation straight out of the box. But let's do another step. So again, I'm going to select all my bolts. So I'm going to choose one bolt, go to my selector, and choose select instances. And I can hide things very easily, either from the selector or by using the shortcut key, which is H. So when I press that, it hides the bolts. And the default behavior, to save you a bit of time, is it's hidden the explode lines as well, because you probably don't want to see them with the bolts not there. So again, I've made changes. I want to save those changes, so I'm going to create a step. So if I just click create step, click create. So really simple. You make your changes, you create a step. Now we're obviously working with a full 3D model here, so you're going to want to manipulate the view in some way. So with your mouse, your left click selects things, but if you use your middle mouse button, that if you use your scroll wheel, that will zoom in and out. And if you click and hold it, it will rotate. And if you use your right mouse button, that will pan. So you can see I can manipulate it exactly like Onshape, really. We do have some options to change the mouse behavior as well if you don't like the default settings. And actually, when you first log into Cadasio and you open your first project, it does show you the settings, so you can make changes to the controls if you wish. So I'm just going to rotate it around like so. Now it's worth pointing out that when you share a Cadasio project with someone, your end user will also be able to rotate, pan, zoom, and interact with it. So you may find that you actually don't need as much text to describe your process, because the end user themselves will be able to zoom in and see something, or they'll see the animation of it moving. You don't need to explain it, which is great because it cuts down on translation, which can be, pretty costly. Now, that being said, obviously you're going to want to add some sort of 2D markup at some point in time. So again, we get any additional items from our toolbox. So if I open up my toolbox, these are just the default ones that come with Cadasio. I'm going to add a label. So to add a label, you click it, and then you'll notice it's attached to my cursor. If I then hover over a 3D object, I'll get a orange plane appearing to indicate that's where I'm going to attach it to. I left click once to attach the leader, and then left click again to attach the actual, to place the actual text. If I don't want any more labels, because I could go off and put a load on now, I can either press my escape key, tick the green tick at the bottom, or a nice quick way is to right click, and that accepts my command that I've just been in. Now a 2D label is just like any other object in our scene. If I click on it to highlight it and select it, you notice the property bar changes again. So I can see the properties relating to this particular bit of text. So for example, I can change its text color, its font, its size, its justification, whether it's bold. I can do things like change its shape if I wanted to. So I might want it to have a rectangular border around it, or back to underline. I can move it around by clicking and dragging it like so. I can change the leader style, I can change the anchor style. So we've got all these customization options. And what's really nice is that you should be able to match your company branding, because obviously you want it to look as good as the rest of your website and so on, and how you like your documents. And if you make the changes and you set your fonts, you set your colors, you can save this into the toolbox, so you don't have to keep redoing it, and then you just take it out of your toolbox and use your company branded stuff over and over again. If I want to set the actual text, dead easy. You just double click, and I can start typing. It's something like that, unscrew. Now, because we're building an interactive document, we also have additional items that you won't see or obviously aren't possible with a printout. So if I go to my toolbox, I can get what's called a checklist. Now, when I put a checklist down, what's really nice about this is it actually prevents the viewer from progressing to the next step unless they tick these items. Now, the checklist itself, I can double click and obviously set some nice text. And if I have it selected, again, all its options are in the property bar down the bottom. So I can change its shape, I can change its text. I can make it so they don't have to tick it and it'll let them carry on. But the default behavior is when they get to this step, to go on to the next step, they have to tick that. So I've made some changes. I've rotated the camera, I've probably zoomed it a bit. I've added a label, I've added a checklist. I want to save this as my next step. So up at the top, click Create Step and click Create. You see I'm just doing the same things over again and building upon what I've already got. Now in my next step, I want to show a couple of these components unscrewing and being removed. So the first thing I'm going to do is hide these two bits of markup. So if I select something, I can just press H and that'll make it hide, click it again and press H. And just to point something out to you, in the selector, as well as the CAD tree, we also have a toolbox tree and they're listed in there as well. And the little tick boxes that you see next to items control whether things are visible or not. So if you want to switch something back on, you can just tick it back on very easily. So I've hidden the 2D markup, and I want to show a couple of components rotating and being removed. So the first thing I'm going to do is rotate them. So I'm going to choose two components, and I do that by left clicking and then holding my control key down and multi-selecting like so. Now, when you have an item selected, you'll no doubt first of all see the translation triads. That allows us to translate things along a particular axis, but we can rotate things as well. If I go to my left-hand side, we've got transform tools, and this is a great area that allows us to do things like move things by delta, copy translations. I'll show you the layout shortly. But one thing it allows us to do is change the view of the triad that we've got. So rather than it being translate, if I click this icon here, we can have a look at rotate. And I'll give you a real good tip, because this is how I generally work. If you've got your triad on screen, a shortcut is just your Alt key, and that toggles between the two. So it saves you having to open the transform tab. If I just click that, you'll see it toggling between the two. So I've hidden my text. I'm now going to rotate these around. So if I hover over the axes I want to rotate around, left click and drag, that will rotate them. Now, what I want to show is it being rotated and then me being moved. So that's a sort of two-step process. Now, when you share this with someone, the general behavior with steps is for it to pause on each step. So when they get to a step, it pauses and it waits for whoever's viewing it to do something to get to the next step. Well, what I want to show is this rotating and then straight away being removed. So I've hidden the text, I've rotated it, I'm going to save this as a step, but this is where step behavior comes into play. Rather than it pausing on this step, I'm going to make it what's called a play step. And what that will do is it'll get to this step, it'll hide the text, it'll rotate it, but rather than stopping, it'll move straight on to the next step. I'm going to multi-select these two items again, drag these out, and perhaps hide them like so, and save that as a step. So I've created several steps really, really quickly. I've obviously been, chatting onto you and showing you bits, but you can see how easy it is. You move your objects, you put additional text on, additional markup on, you hide, you show things, and you create steps every time you've got a stopping point that you want to show in the viewer. yeah, so I've created several steps. I can view all the steps that I've created by going up to the top and clicking the step name, and that will come up with what's called the Steps Manager. And this is really quite nice. From here, we can very quickly edit and update steps. If I hover over an existing step, you'll see we have options to open, edit, delete, update. We have some great tools at the top to rename things en masse. And one tool that I really like is this one, the reverse order. Because what you'll generally find is you're going to bring your assembly in fully assembled from Onshape. You could then create your steps disassembling it. But of course, what you actually want to show your customer is how to put it together. So quite often you're going to create your cadasio projects disassembling it, and then right at the end you can just do a reverse order, and then what you're going to get is a project where it's showing it being assembled. As well as that, as well as being able to kind of reverse them en masse, we can manually reorder stuff. So I've actually got a step here that I created just before the webinar called internal. I can just click and drag, and I can reorientate that, reorder that like so. The box that you see with the sort of orange highlight is our currently active step. You may notice that step 5's got a green kind of border to it, and that's to indicate that it's a play step. So we try and keep everything nice and visual and very simple to comprehend what's going on. To activate a step, I can hover over it, I can just click open, and it'll go off and activate it like so. Another great feature, because we're building an interactive document here, is that we have options to link not only 2D objects, but 3D objects. Now, these links could be to an external website or even to other cadasio projects and steps. So if you've got a huge assembly, and perhaps there's common sub-assemblies between several of your big assemblies, then what you can do is create a link to different cadasio projects. So they click on the engine in the car, it takes into a project detailing the engine. But in our case, what I'm going to do is create a link that's just linking to another step in this project. So if I go to my toolbox, as I said, I can create a link between anything really within cadasio, but I'm going to do it between a picture and a step. And whilst this is our default toolbox, what's pretty nice is we do come with additional toolboxes out the box. You can make your own up. But if I have a look at in the MISC area, we've got some hotspots, and these are basically just pictures. And I'm going to use this marker gear. So I'm going to click once with my left button, and then click once again to place it. I don't want any more, so I'm going to right click to accept the command. With 2D items, I can select them and I can resize them, something like that. And what I want to occur here is when someone's viewing this in 3D, if they click this little marker, I want them to be taken to that step that I'd created previously. So to link something, I select it. You'll notice the property bar changes. So I keep banging on about the property bar. That's where you make a lot of your changes. Under the general tab, we have the option to link. So if I go to link and on click link, I can link it to a URL. Now that could be really handy because you could have your logo on here. So when they click on that, it takes them to your home page. Or you may have a button that says, click here to order this part or reorder this assembly or whatever. It takes them straight to your shopping cart. So this could be a standard URL. Or as I said before, it could be a step. So I'm going to link this to a step in the current project, and I'm going to link it to this previously created step called internal. I'm just going to click add. So it's as simple as that. Now you won't see these changes yet. I'm going to show you in the viewer shortly, but that will now behave that when someone clicks on that, you'll take them to a particular step. Just to show you as well that some of our toolbox items come with predefined animations. So if I choose this marker and go to general and animations, you'll see we have animation options for how things behave when they show, when they hide, when they move, and what are called attention animations. And these animations aren't just for 2D objects, they're for 3D ones as well. So for example, this thing here has got an attention animation of wobble. And what that'll do, if I just change it, it'll give you a nice little wobble to indicate, look, you can click me, it's an attention, it's a call to action. So it's really quite nice. Now I've made changes to this start step. I don't want to have to create a new step from this. I just want to update my existing one. So rather than clicking create step, I'm going to go to the top of the screen and click update step. And that will save any changes I've made to the current step. And you know which is your current step because it's listed here. Okay, so I've made several steps. What can I actually do with this? You know, what output do I get from this? So one thing to point out is that at any time you can get an image out of Cadasio for you to use elsewhere. So in the bottom left-hand corner, we've got this little camera. And if I click on that, it'll go off and it'll give me an image of my current screen. So really quick, very easy. And if you just want to bang a quick image out of something to perhaps you're emailing it or putting it in a Word document, that's one way. You can just click that, and whatever you see on screen, you'll get an image of it. Now, obviously, if you've got 100 steps, that's going to be pretty time consuming to click that over and over again 100 times. So once you're at a stage where you want to start doing stuff with this, you're probably going to want to publish it. In the top left-hand corner, we've got the Cadasio main menu. So if I click on that, I can go to Dashboard. Okay, here's my project. If I hover over it, this option here is Open Designer. That takes me to the designer that we were just in for me to add more steps and do what I want with. I can copy projects, I can delete projects, or if I click Open, then we get the project details, things like its name and so on. And if I click on the Publish tab, we can start to actually get stuff out of this. So one thing I can do is publish all my step images in one go. And from here, I can do all of them. I can do a single step, I can do a range of steps. But if I hit publish, what that'll do is go off and get all the images from the steps and download a zip file of them all. So if I had 100 steps, I'm going to get 100 images out really quick, dead easy. But why settle for just a 2D image? As part of creating my steps and getting these 2D images out, if that's all you're interested in at the moment, if all you want to do is put stuff in Word, that's great. But you created these steps, why not straight away get it shared online? So if I click publish under publish online, a couple of things will happen. You'll notice a QR code gets generated. Okay, an embed code gets generated and a public URL gets generated. So the QR code is really quite nifty. You can download this at a size that you require so that you could print this out, stick it onto your physical product, and then when you send it out, ship it out to someone, all they have to do on their phone or their tablet is scan it, and then they'll be presented with your Cadasio 3D interactive project. The embed code works a bit similar to YouTube. It's an iframe that you can, if you copy that bit of HTML, you give it to your website guy, he could then put this onto your own website. So then you've got your own Cadasio 3D thing in your own website. The final thing it will give you is your public URL. So this is just a direct link that you can share with someone. If you want to hyperlink it, you're giving it to someone in in an email, something like that. I can very quickly copy it by clicking a little copy. And let's actually show you what you get. So if I just open up a new tab and go to it, I'm just using Chrome here. I could be on a Mac, I could be on my iPhone, I could be on anything, but you'll see that it loads up and we've got a nice 3D experience for someone to look at the project that I've created. So I'm now actually in the viewer aspect of Cadasio here. This, as I say, it could be on my tablet, it could be in Firefox, it could be on your Mac. We're very versatile in that way. As long as it's a sort of modern internet-enabled device, you're gonna be able to see it. Now with the viewer, the default thing that you see is a navigation at the bottom for someone to be able to step through these steps. So if you don't do anything else, this is what you're going to see, and I can click next and it'll start taking us through the steps. Now it's worth pointing out that you don't have to use this navigation bar at the bottom. You can hide that and build your own navigation using links. But if I just step through, you'll see that the bolts have come out, they're showing the markup that I've added. Next step, they disappear. If I click next, it rotates around. And whilst I'm doing this, just in case I wasn't clear, I can rotate this and do what I want. I can zoom in. So as a user, I can zoom. What is that pointing to? I can zoom right in and see. So you might find that you don't need as many detail views anymore. If you think of a 2D instruction manual, often you have like a balloon detail view showing a zoomed in bit. You don't need that. Just have a step where it's zoomed in, and the camera will go in there and show them what they need to see, or let the user do it themselves. Now, when I'm on this step, not only have I got my unscrew showing, you'll notice I can't progress on because I've not ticked my checklist. So it gives me a bit of a warning. So that just ensures that I have switched the power off in this case. So just click it, power's off. I can now continue. Now what's going to happen here, if you remember, I created a play step. So what you'll actually see is kind of 2 steps here. So if I click next, you'll see the text disappearing, you'll see it rotate, but rather than stopping, it'll go straight on and the parts will move as well. So if I click next, disappears, rotates, and comes out. So you can imagine that I could actually chain, 3, 4, 10, 20 steps all together to give us a real nice animation of things zooming around, disappearing, appearing, moving, and so on. Now, if I go back to my start step, there's that little marker that I put on, that little hotspot. Hopefully this is okay with the webinar, but you should see it kind of bouncing up and down. Hopefully that's coming across okay. That's the attention animation that's in there. You may have seen it drop in. It's got an animation for when it appears as well. Again, that's all nice and linked, so I can rotate around and you see it moves with it. And if I click on there, then you'll see it takes us to the step that I previously created, which is this internal step. Again, on here, I've got an image with Cadasio logo on there, so that could be a link to our website. That's got an attention animation, a sort of pulsing thing to draw your attention to it. And just to show you as well, these have got, it's not just limited to 2D stuff. My 3D objects have got attention animations on. So I don't want you to think there's any sort of simulation going on here. What I've done is I've just told these things to rotate along a particular axis. And obviously in Onshape, you know, it's brilliant. You can draw everything perfectly, and all the gears mesh nicely. So with these all rotating at the same time, it gives a nice impression of it all meshing, and I can rotate and zoom in and do what I want. So this is the viewer aspect of it. As a viewer, I can share this with anyone. They don't have to pay to view it. You're just sending them a link and they'll see it. And this could be on your tablet, your phone, or obviously on a PC like I'm doing now. Now, this is obviously a really quick example, just to give you a bit of an understanding. And what's worth pointing out, actually, with the view aspect, whilst we're on here, if I go back to my dashboard, a couple of options that you've got. You can change. You may have noticed I had to hit a play button when it first loaded. I can change that to auto start. So as soon as it's loaded on the page, it loads up. We can try and force it to go full screen when they hit play as well, and we can also set a password. So if I don't want just anyone being able to see it, I can set a password on there, and then they'll be prompted to put a password on. Okay, so to get to the publish area, in the dashboard, this is the Cadasio dashboard. This is where you can set up your account details and so on. You just open the project and click publish. When you start building up your projects in Cadasio, you'll get a load of cards here with your different projects. As I said before, you just hit Open Designer, and that'll take you to start now making changes to that project. So as I said, this is a real quick example, but I want to show you the power and where the advantages of Cadasio comes in. Because what happens if the Onshape person makes a change to that assembly? You know, Onshape is amazing. You can do all sorts of incredible features in there. And me as the technical author, I want to just get started on my documentation. But what happens if the Onshape person adds new features or adds new parts? Well, let me show you what happens. And this is why I've done it in a separate window, to show you some nice behavior. If I go back to Onshape and go to my gearbox, now obviously I could, in this assembly, I could start adding a load of additional components. I could perhaps swap things in out or add holes to stuff. I'm just going to make a real simple change of changing this joint. I'm going to change its configuration so it's a bit longer. So just real quick, something like that. So I'm the Onshape guy. I've made my changes. I'm happy. I know that the person doing the technical authoring, or perhaps it's myself that's doing it, but I know that I want to update my Cadasio project. So on the Cadasio tab at the bottom, rather than create new, I don't want to create new project, I can go to update, and you'll see it lists the projects that I've got. So I want to update my gearbox. You'll see it's giving me a version 2, and I could put in longer joint, I think it was called. Now, when I click update, what that'll do is go off and start updating the project. And it's worth pointing out that as Cadasio, we're not really interested in your Onshape documents too much. We don't care about the features you've used or your sketches or all the kind of important stuff to create the geometry. all we're interested in is your mesh data, essentially. Okay, the stuff that you want to display to us when you display data. So when I've clicked update, what that's doing is converting it. And me as the technical author, I could be working away in Cadasio, and you'll see that it pops up and there's a new file version available. It's telling me it's version 2, and all right, I've got a longer join. Do I want to use this? If I click yes, it will go off and update, and you should see the geometry's changed to reflect that longer configuration. And what's great now is if I go through my steps, obviously every step's using that geometry, like so. Now, if I was purely interested in kind of 2D output, then all I'd need to do is go to the publish area again, click publish all my 2D steps, and I'll go off and I'll have all my steps again, but with the new look joint on there. But what's really neat is that I've kept this project published. So I could have unpublished it or made a new copy of it or anything like that, but I purposely kept this published. And if I just refresh my live viewer and just load it up again, right, you'll see straight away that in real time that's updated as well, because I've kept it like that on purpose. Now this is pretty powerful because it means that my online documentation, you know, doesn't ever need to get out of date. I'm never going to be giving my end users, my customers, out of date info. So really quite powerful there. Okay, so with Cadasio, there's a few advantages for you. You're going to take a more modern approach to your technical communication. That repurposes your existing 3D data to increase comprehension, reduce translation and printing costs. And actually translation, I was looking just the other day for someone, some companies charge £3.5 grand to translate a technical document. So you could save quite substantially. Because you can push your design changes up to Cadasio, you can save on rework, you're not having to redraw everything again. And it actually means you can start your documentation process a lot earlier, which ultimately reduces your time to market, which is great. So I was going on before about how you can view this stuff, you view the Cadasio output on a phone or tablet, but that does prove, you know, does bring some challenges with it. So if I just open up this again, just to explain one of the problems that you've got, obviously screen sizes and orientations vary quite dramatically between phones, your desktop and a tablet. So imagine this, I'm gonna create a step here where I'm showing all the parts that are required for this assembly. So in the transform tools, I'm going to click on here and I'm going to use the layout tool. This is a great tool. And what this will do is very quickly gives a layout of one of each of the items, like so. Now on my screen, I'm using a standard HD monitor here, 1920 by 1080. I might use my mouse and rotate it around and pan it, and that looks absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to update my step. I'm really happy with that. But what happens if I view this on a phone, for example? You know, it could really squash it, it could be out of position and so on. So this is where in Cadasio we have this concept of devices. So if I go into this area here, you can make your own devices up, but Cadasio comes with a couple. You see we've got phone and tablet, and basically these are just different aspect ratios. So if I go to phone, you'll see it for a standard phone, I think this is based on an iPhone, it doesn't look too bad in a landscape orientation. But if you use this icon here, I can change to portrait, and all of a sudden you can realize that if someone views this step in a portrait phone, half of it's going to be cut off. They'd have to manually zoom out then. They can still zoom out and interact, but it's not a great impression of this step. So what I would now do is I would manipulate this for this particular device. So if I zoom out, I might just be happy doing that. But what's really great is I'm essentially going to create sub-properties for this start step. So what I'm actually going to do is use the transform tool again to create a layout, but rather than it being sort of landscape orientation, I'm just going to change this a bit so it's 2 columns to give us a more portrait view, like so. Okay, let's just do something like that. And you'll notice that the update has actually changed to give you a little phone in there to indicate what we're actually going to do is update the device properties for this step. So I'm going to choose that. And what's really nice now is when you load Cadasio up in the viewer, it looks at your aspect ratio and says, oh, hang on, I'm using a portrait phone. I better show these properties for this step. So it will load the start step up, and if it matches the aspect ratio, it doesn't have to be exact, it picks the best fit, it will go off and show this. And if I toggle between the two, phone, none, that's what you're going to get. Now, just in case you think I'm doing any sort of, it's just in Cadasio this, I can actually demonstrate this in Chrome. So in Chrome, you have the ability to with the developer tools, show what it looks like on different devices. So all I'm going to do is just toggle it. I don't know what phone this is. This is on a Moto G4. You'll see that's how it would appear if I was viewing it. So if someone opens it up on a desktop, that's what they get. If they open it up on a phone, that's what they get. So really quite nifty. And it's not just limited to your 2D stuff, to your 3D stuff, sorry. If I go off and, typically with a view like this, you might have a bomb on there, or at the very least, you might have some balloons. So let's just quickly whack on a load of balloons. That might be okay for my my normal desktop view, but you'll notice when I go to phone, because of the different resolutions, actually the text is going to be a bit small. So just for the phone, I'm going to increase my text size a bit and update the start step like so. And that way I can ensure that it looks great no matter what device. Now, what I don't want you to think you have to do is you have to go through every step and do this. What you typically do is design your product design your steps in Cadasio, do your 20 steps, 100 steps, whatever it is for your desktop. And then at the end, just run through in a particular device. If you know it's definitely going to be viewed on a tablet or a phone, run through in that device and just see what fits and doesn't fit and just tweak it. And you don't necessarily have to do every step. If you're just exploding stuff, you might find it fits great. But this gives you complete control and ensures that it looks good on any device that's going to get viewed on.